Hello, we are back, guys. We are back with another day of our book club. Excuse me. Be Holy, for I Am Holy book club. And we are reading the beautiful visions of Anne Catherine Emmerich and all Jesus's life and the Bible through her visions, through Genesis to Revelation. And right now, we're still in the walk with Jesus going to the baptism with John the Baptist. And there's a few more days before the actual baptism, which is amazing because we've never really got to do this in the Bible. So this is little extra we get from her visions.
And
she
all approved. She was
Yes.
beatified. When was she beatified?
2004.
All approved by the church, line by line. It is doctrinally correct, and it is it's doctrinally not opposed doctrinally, and it is what's the other thing? What is the other thing, Jeanette? Doctrinally, historically correct. So it's
Yes.
not correct, but not opposing. We don't have to believe it, but I'm going to tell you something. Almost all Catholic theologians take her stuff and build on it because it's just amazing, guys. Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
And so today we're going to Jesus and Eliud walking and conversing together. The next day, Jesus went with Eliud southward from Nazareth through the valley of Esdraelon, on the road to Jerusalem. When about 2 hours beyond the brook Kison, they arrived at a village consisting of a synagogue and inn, only a few houses. It was one of the environs of the not far distant Endor, and nearby was a celebrated spring. Jesus put up at the inn. The people of the place behaved rather coldly, though not intimately toward him. Eliud was not held in special esteem by them, for they were rather farraskolo. How do you say that? Farraskolo. Jesus notified their head men that he intended to teach in the synagogue, but they replied that was not usual for strangers. Jesus told them that he had a special call to do. So, and entering the school, he taught of the Messiah, whose kingdom was not of this world, whose coming would not be attended by outward splendor, also of John's baptism. The priests of the synagogue were not favorably inclined toward Jesus. Jesus bade them give him the scriptures. He enrolled them and explained many passages from the prophets. Eliud's confident communications with Jesus were to be singularly touching. He knew and believed in his mission and supernatural advent, still without appearing to be a suspicion that he was God himself. He told Jesus quite naturally as they walked together many things connected with his youth, what the prophetess Anna had related to him, also what she had heard from Mary after the return from Egypt, for Mary had sometimes visited her in Jerusalem. Jesus, in turn, related to Eliud some things that he did not know, each accompanied with significant interpretation. But all was so natural, so simple, like a dear old man speaking with a beloved young friend. While Eliud was rehearsing that Anna had heard from Mary and told to him, I saw all in pictures. I rejoiced to find them exactly similar to what I had long before seen and partly forgotten. Jesus spoke to Eliud also of his journey to the baptism. He had gathered together many people and sent them to the desert near Ophrah. But he said that he would go alone by the road past Bithynia, where he wanted to speak with Lazarus. He spoke of Lazarus by another general name, which I have forgotten. He mentioned also his father, saying that he had been in war. He said that Lazarus and his sisters were rich and that they would devote all they had to the advancement of redemption. Lazarus had 3 sisters, the eldest Martha, the youngest Mary Magdalene, and one between them also called Mary. This last lived together secluded, her silence causing her to be looked upon as a simpleton. She went by no other name than Silent Mary. Jesus, speaking to Eliud on this family, said, Martha is good and pious. She will, with her brother, follow me. Of Mary the silent, he said, she is possessed of great mind and understanding, but for the good of her soul, they have been withdrawn from her. She is not for this world, therefore is she now altogether secluded from it. But she has never committed sin. If I should speak to her, she would perfectly comprehend the greatest mysteries. She will not live much longer. After her death, Lazarus and his sister Martha will follow me and devote all that they possess to the use of the community. The youngest sister, Mary, has strayed from the right path, but she will return and rise to higher sanctity than Martha. And
Eliud spoke also of John the Baptist, but he had not yet seen him and was not yet baptized. Jesus and Eliud spent the night at the inn near the synagogue, and early on the following morning, they journeyed along Mount Hermon toward the somewhat dilapidated city of Endor. Around the inns lay masses of broken walls all along the way along the mountain, so broad that a wagon could pass over them. Endor was full of ruins interspersed with gardens. On one side were large, magnificent buildings like palaces, while in other quarters of the city, the desolation of war was visible. It seemed to me that the inhabitants were a race apart from the Jews. There was no synagogue in Endor, so Jesus went with Eliud to a large square in which 3 side buildings containing small chambers were built around a pond. The pond was in the center of a green lawn, and on its waters little barks were sailing. There was a pump nearby, and the place bore the appearance of a health-giving resort. The little chambers around the pond were occupied by invalids. Jesus, accompanied by Eliud, entered one of the buildings. He was hospitably received and his feet washed. A high seat was erected for him on the lawn, and there he taught the people. The women who occupied one of these wings took back seats in the audience. These people were not Orthodox Jews. They were more like slaves, cast out and oppressed, who had to pay tribute of all that they earned. After a certain war, they remained behind the city. I think their leader Sisera was defeated not far off, and that was then murdered by a woman. His army had been scattered throughout the whole country and reduced to servitude. There were still about 400 in these parts. Their forefathers had, under David and Solomon, been forced to quarry stones for the building of the temple. They were long accustomed to such work. The deceased king Herod had employed them in the building an aqueduct on Mount Sion of several hours in length. They were very compassionate and stood by one another under all circumstances. They wore long coats and girdles. Their pointed caps covered their ears like those of ancient hermits. They had no communication with the Jews, although they were allowed to send their children to Jewish schools. But the poor little creatures were so badly treated and so despised that the parents preferred keeping them home. Jesus felt great compassion for them. He had the sick brought to him. They sat in a kind of bed like my reclining chair. I can still see them, under the movable back of which were supports. When the back was let down, the chair formed a bed. As Jesus instructed them about the Messiah and the baptism and exhorted them to the latter, they answered timidly that they could not lay claim to such a privilege, for they were only poor outcasts. Then he taught them by the parable of the unjust steward. The clear interpretation he gave of it I perfectly understood. It haunted me the whole day. But now I have forgotten it. Perhaps I shall recall it again. Jesus also related to the parable of the son sent by his father to take possession of his vineyard. He always related that when instructing the poor, neglected heathens, the people prepared a repast for Jesus out in the open air. He invited to it the poor and the sick, and he and Eliud served them at table. This action greatly impressed his entertainers. That evening, Jesus returned with Eliud to the place outside of Nazareth, where he stayed overnight and celebrated the Sabbath in the synagogue. The following day, Jesus and Eliud returned to Endor, which was only a Sabbath distance from the inn, and there he taught. The inhabitants were Canaanites, and I think from Sikkim, for I heard that day at least once the name of Sychemite. They had an idol hidden away in a subterranean cavern. By some kind of mechanism on springs, it could be made to rise suddenly out of the earth and seat itself on an altar beautifully ornamented and prepared to receive it. They had procured this idol from Egypt, and it was named Astarte, which I understood yesterday to be the same as Esther. Where was I? The idol had a face round like the moon. On its outstretched arms, it held something long and swathed, like the chrysalis of a butterfly, large in the middle and tapering at either end. It may have been a fish. On the back of the idol was a pedestal upon which stood a high pail, or a small half-tub, which extended over the head. It was something like ears in green husks, also fruit and green leaves. The idol stood in a cask that reached up to the lower part of the body, and all around it were pots of growing plants. These people worshiped their idol in secret, and Jesus, in his instructions to them, reprehended them for it. They had been accustomed to sacrifice deformed children to the goddess. There was a companion idol belonging to this goddess, and the god Adonis, who I think was Astarte's husband. This nation had been said, as has been said, had been defeated in 3 parts under General Sisera and scattered as slaves throughout the country. They were at this time greatly oppressed and despised. Not very long before Christ, they had excited some disturbance around Herod's castle in Galilee, after which they were still more oppressed. In the afternoon, Jesus and Eliud returned to the synagogue, and there ended the Sabbath. The Jews, meanwhile, were very much displeased at Jesus' visit to Endor, but he reprehended them very severely for their hard-heartedness toward their abandoned fellow human beings, or their fellow beings. He exhorted them to a spirit of kindness and urged them to take them to the baptism, which they themselves had, at his recommendation, resolved to receive. The Jews of this place became more favorably inclined toward Jesus after they had heard his instructions. Toward evening, he returned to Nazareth with Eliud. He saw them conversing together the whole way, sometimes even pausing to stand and talk. Eliud was again recalling many of the incidents of the flight into Egypt, and I saw them again in vision. He began by asking whether Jesus was not going to extend his kingdom over the whole people in Egypt, who had been impressed by his presence among them in his childhood. Here, I saw again that the journey of Jesus after raising Lazarus, again pagan Asia, down to Egypt, which I had seen before, was no dream of mine, for Jesus told Eliud that whenever the seed had been sown, would he before his end reap the harvest. Eliud knew of the sacrifice of bread and wine, also of Melchizedek, but he knew not what idea to form of Jesus. He questioned him as to whether he was not another Melchizedek. Jesus answered, "No, Melchizedek had to pave the way for my sacrifice, but I shall be the sacrifice itself." Wow. I learned also from that conversation that Noemi, Mary's teacher in the temple, was the aunt of Lazarus, his mother's sister. Lazarus' father was the son of a Syrian king who had, for services in war, received some property as a reward. His wife was a Jewess of a distinction. She belonged to the priestly race of Aaron, although Manasseh allied with Anna and dwelt in Jerusalem. They owned 3 castles, one in Bethania, one near Herodium, and one at Magdalum on the Sea of Galilee, not far from Tiberias and Gabara. Herod also had a castle in the country near Magdalum. Jesus and Eliud spoke also of the scandal Magdalene gave her family. Jesus went home with Eliud. There they found assembled the 5 disciples, the Essenians, and many others who were desirous of going to the baptism. Some publicans also had come to Nazareth for the same purpose, and several bands had already started for the place at baptism. Wow, we're getting close. And the next one for, what is it? What's today, Jeanette? Friday?
Yes.
So
Monday is the next one.
Jesus in Nazareth is Monday, the next one. So, oh guys, we are getting so close.
I think there's like 2 or 3 left before the baptism or something.
So if you guys don't know, Jeanette has taken a book called Anne Catherine Emmerich's Visions of the Rosary, each mystery, and she takes each decade. They are about 30 minutes. She keeps it pretty compact. There it is. You're going to see below, and I urge you to watch not only the baptism, but at some point within the next couple of weeks, we will be putting it up on Jeanette's YouTube. And what we're going to do is we're going to put them individually on her site, but then we're going to put them all together so that people can choose how they want to watch them. And because they're 30 minutes. Now, I don't know if you know this, but you could change the speed. Like I put everything to 2 times because, I'm a quick, I like to take things in quick because I want to get as much information as possible. So I put it on at times 2. And so if it's an hour and a half and there are 5 mysteries, it would not an hour and a half. If they were a half an hour, it would be 2.5 hours for one whole rosary. But what you can do is change the speed. And if you need I'm going to put a little instruction thing to show people. So they could change the speed.
And such a good teacher. You're so smart with all this technical stuff. I can't do any of it.
Happens to be a gift. Yeah, but your gifts are even more valuable in bridge building and evangelization. So that's okay. We all have our gifts, and that's why we're together.
I'm a crafter. See, guys, I'm a crafter. I make
but you're so much more than a crafter, honey. Listen, so instead of being 2.5 hours, it would be 1 hour and 15 minutes if you times it by 2. And you can watch if you don't know, the rosary from the joyful starts Jesus's childhood up to 12 years old, before birth to childhood years old to 12 years old. Then the luminous, which is on Thursday, that's Monday and Saturday. On Thursdays is the luminous, but it's the next in after his childhood. It's his ministry and the sacraments, the luminous, and those 5 mysteries. Then is the sorrowful, where he's 33 years old. So he's 30 and 33 through his through the sacraments and through his ministry, which is the luminous. And then the sorrowful is his is when he his the sorrowful is when he is scourged, and all those
walking Calvary all the way to the cross.
And then he is in the end crucified. Calvary, yeah.
I can never pronounce that word.
Right, then he's crucified. And then the last of the mysteries, so he's 30 to 33 during the sorrowful mysteries, but then he is after death. So this is his entire lifetime, the rosaries. If you don't know that, it's gospel on a string. So on the 4th of them is the glorious, which are my favorite, and they are the resurrection, and Pentecost, and the other one, and then finally Mary's crowning, which we are to imitate her, especially for women and for men, and she's the perfect mother. So when our mother dies, she becomes our mother. And so just so many beautiful things. The rosary is literally a gospel in the string. So if you don't have time to listen to our whole book here, listen to Jeanette's rosary. And again, it's going to be below that you can watch on her Facebook. I have it in albums. I should go on your Facebook and put it in albums too, Jeanette. I should, that, Jeanette? I should
Yeah.
go on your Facebook and put all of your rosaries in albums like I have it on mine, because I have so many albums. People really have to look, but on yours you don't have many.
No,
So
because I don't know how to do any of that, guys.
I know
I can't do
I need to
anything.
do that. I need to do that. I need to go on your Facebook at one day when I'm at your house, and I have to put it on there. But anyway, guys, we're going to put it on her YouTube. It's just going to be a little bit of time. So anyway, so let's get focused. Just
Okay.
what I'm trying to say is you need to uh that rosary, it's going to help you during your rosary, because she gives us more information and helps you visualize. Because remember, the point of the gospel, the point of spiritual reading, the point is when we're at adoration and you're doing your rosary, when you're at before mass or after mass and you're doing your rosary on holy ground, as Jeanette says, or you're at home, and as you become to know your mysteries, you will be able to visually be there. That is so important, because we need to unite our own lives with Christ for every suffering, for every success, for every redemption in our lives, and to call people to, when he does the proclamation of the kingdom in the sacraments of the luminous. These are such important moments, and she gives us a more depth. We get layers of understanding, because we only have so much in the gospel. These are used by the church leaders and by theologians. So anyway, please
And
look at those
also,
rosaries.
and also it's so refreshing
It
because
is.
we're so used to
Right.
the same kind of readings because we read them over and over again. Yes, there's different
And we
verses,
kind of take it
different
for
ways.
granted. Yeah.
Yes, we kind of take it for granted, and just being able to get little things in
Yes.
between what
Yes.
happened and a little bit more about what they wore or whatever, you kind of vision it better. And it's just so amazing because it makes you feel closer and it makes you feel like you really know these
Yes.
people from the Bible. Like now we learned, today a little bit about Lazarus I didn't know about.
And
He had other sisters and there was two Marys and this and that. So it's little things that we're getting to know in our minds, and
the
it's just
rosary,
exciting, very exciting.
yeah, and the rosary unlocks the gospel, guys. It was originally started, Mary brought it to I think it was at Dominic, Saint Dominic, and yes, Saint John Paul II added his ministry, the luminous, because it was necessary to help us have the entire from pre-birth to after death, Jesus's whole life. So with the rosary in is the gospel on a string. And when you get to see these little pieces that Jeanette reads of her visions, it puts you in the scene. We are part of our family history. As Jeff Caven says, when we study the Bible, when we do spiritual reading, we are gaining understandings, dimensions, layers of understanding to put us there. That's why Jesus wants us studying his gospel. Go ahead, Jeanette. I'm
And
sorry.
you don't have to listen to me try to struggle through the reading. You can
You can
get
put
the
it on
book.
times two.
You
Well,
can
yeah.
get the book. Amazon has it
Yes.
actually, and all the
For
other
$3.
places probably have it.
$3.
$3 at Amazon?
Yeah.
I thought it was $11. Is it the
Well,
bigger one?
that's for the paperback, but the $3 is for the Kindle, because a lot of people today don't want to carry
Oh, I
big
didn't
books.
know that. Oh,
Yes,
that's
the
even
Kindle's
better.
$3. Yes.
That's even better.
So
Yes.
anyway, guys, seriously, you gotta listen to those. We're gonna put them up. So anyway, let's get focused on today. This is before the baptism. Eliud, I had no idea about him, so I'm excited to learn this guy. I mean, I feel like I'm with Jesus when he is teaching. When I hear these things, guys, he's teaching them. Like, we are so lucky to have this. So here they are. They're going southward from Nazareth. Oh, I want to do the map. hold on, guys.
You can stop it.
I'm going to stop it. Hold on. Jeanette ran to grab, to get to the ladies' room or grab her tea or whatever. But in any case, it says here that they are southward toward Nazareth. So here's Nazareth. They are apparently somewhere up here at this moment going towards Nazareth. It may be the Sea of Galilee, I'm not sure. But this is why I like to have the map. It gives us a little insight of where they are. Oops, I didn't want to go that much, but they're going toward, I think it said southward. Yeah. Through the valley, on the road to Jerusalem. So going to Jerusalem, Nazareth. Okay, so towards here. So they're going from Nazareth to Jerusalem. And this looks real big, but it really is not that big. But in any case, so they're about 2 hours beyond the brook of Kaizen, where they arrive at a village consisting of a synagogue, an inn, and that's only a few houses. It was one not far from Endor. So somewhere in between that is all Endor, and Jesus celebrated spring. Oh, so it was springtime during this time. So Jesus put up at the inn. The people behaved rather coldly, though not amicably, which I looked up real quick because I did not know that, tending to obstruct or harm. So, let's see, the people behaved rather coldly, but they weren't creating obstructions or harm. They just were like indifferent, kind of. So Eliud was not held in special esteem by them, which apparently he was by others, and were rather pharisaical. I don't even know how to pronounce that. And Jeanette had a hard time with it as well, but it means they were more like the Pharisees. They were more like the Pharisees, and Eliud was not respected as, I guess he's some sort of prophet or whatever. But Jesus notified their head men that he intended to teach at the synagogue, but they replied that that was not usual for strangers. They're like, what? Jesus told them no, that he had a special call to do so. And entering the school, he taught of the Messiah, whose kingdom was not of this world, whose coming would not be attended by outward splendor. Also of John's baptism. Remember what he's doing. He's sowing seeds, trying to get people to go to the baptism. That is the whole purpose of these travels that he's going on, is he's trying to tell them, get to John, get the baptism, join my kingdom. And so he's going there, but he has to keep himself under the veil, because otherwise Herod would be threatened and coming to kill the next Herod, not the first Herod that killed all the babies. His, I guess, descendant, who took a, that they divided it in quarters. And Herod I don't know if he's Herod the Great or what.
Yeah, they use the same name, right? Isn't it
well,
weird?
It's the same as us. We use the same names over and over too, when you think about it. But anyway, there's even Jesus, which is Jesus, so it's common to reuse names. I mean, how many names can there be? There's nothing new under the sun, right? So in any case, that Herod, he is sort of like a governor over the 4 places. He's the one who ends up, saying, well, I'm going to kill him, because he threatens his kingship. Because remember, Joseph was supposed to be the king over the other Herod, and Jesus, his son, would be the next king. So he's telling them of his kingdom, but it's not of this world. It's not the kingdom they think, where you fight and you kill. No, it's the kingdom of love, and where love of neighbor is the commandment. Remember, these Jews were killing each other. These Pharisees, these what are the other ones, Jeanette? The Sadducees. They're not following the way the Bible wants. So what does God do? He sends his son to teach us the second most commandment after honor your father. He said, the commandment is love your neighbor as yourself, which is what we are supposed to do, which is why we have to unite and understand the Gospels and spread them in the Rosary and in the Gospel. We're spreading the good news. So he's tending, he's doing the soil. What do you do with the soil? You sow the soil, Jeanette. Jeanette's a gardener. So that's what he's doing. The priests of the synagogue were not favorably inclined toward Jesus, but he's like, but I have authority. And he slips himself in there. And Jesus bade give them the scriptures. He unrolled them, guys. Jesus is unrolling the scriptures. And we like get to see this with many passages from the prophets. You know, and she goes back and forth through what her experience and telling what she's seeing in her visions to take us along. And she says, Eliud's confident communications with Jesus were to me singularly touching. So she is so touched by Eliud and Jesus talking to one another. We're getting to see this through her. He knew of and believed in Jesus's mission and supernatural advent, still without appearing to have suspicion that he was God himself. So he kind of thought Jesus was like the Jews do. My second husband, who was a Jew, said they see Jesus as a great man and prophet. And that's how Eliud is seeing him. See, and he doesn't see him as God himself, and they can't, because otherwise they will kill him, and he needs to get his mission accomplished, his ministry. So he's 30 years old during this point. He's 30, and he has the whole his whole ministry to get through, which is, of course, we know 3 years from the gospel. So he told Jesus quite naturally as they walked together. Can you see Eliud and Jesus, Jeanette, walking together? Many things connected with his youth. Just like we share, I tell Jeanette about my childhood, she tells me about hers. And Eliud tells about his youth and what the prophetess Anna had related to him. So Eliud has heard things from the prophetess Anna, and he shares them. And he's telling Jesus about this and what she'd heard.
The prophetess Anna was like Aunt Catherine of our day and age, you know. Yes. These prophecies that are called prophetesses in those days are prophet women that also have these like visions and things. So yeah, it still is happening today.
And God gave them messages.
Yeah.
They're like our angels, our messengers. The prophets get dreams, just like Jesus communicates with all of us. It's just the more we learn about the gospel, the more he will download. The more you do the rosary, the more he will give you under spiritual eyes. And so what happens is these prophets help us, and they think Jesus is just another prophet. So it's just so beautiful. And he's telling him about that what she had heard from Mary after the return of Egypt, Jesus's mother. So he's telling him of what happened to Jesus's mother, and Jesus's was a child at that time. So he's getting to hear a little bit of his own, his own family history through the prophetess. After the return from Egypt, for Mary had sometimes visited her in Jerusalem. Mary and Anna, the prophetess, who Mary actually knew and had a personal relationship with. Jesus, in turn, related to Eliud some things he did not know, each accompanied with significant interpretation. So they're taking this and making it three-dimensional. And Anne Catherine Emmerich, remember, she's seen visions since she was a child, and she learned to oppress them a bit because she didn't know it wasn't normal. See, these things are normal to people with spiritual eyes, and people look at them like, well, what do you know? Why are you such an authority? But God, the veil between them and God is thinner. It will happen to you too as you study. It happens to all of us. It is really just understanding and putting things in perspective, which is what we're doing in these readings, in our spiritual reading. That's why it is encouraged and is said by, I think, is it Padre Pio, that reading is our way to perfection.
Yeah, Padre
Okay.
Pio said that.
Yeah, and this is it. These readings that are approved by the church. In any case, so but all were natural and simple, like a dear old man talking with a beloved young friend. Eliud is an old man. Jesus is a young man. He's 30 at this time. It's right before his ministry. While Eliud was rehearsing what Anna had heard from Mary and told to him, I saw all in pictures. She gets actual pictures. We all have visions or understandings, and they aren't always in images. Sometimes they're just in understanding. Hers come with images. I mean, how lucky is she? So we have to conjure up those images from her visions. I can do that personally. I'm able to do that. Some people, I don't know. You have to, I think, practice it. It's a skill. And the more you do it, the more you are able to. So while Eliud was rehearsing what Anna heard, okay, so she sees it in pictures. I rejoiced in finding them exactly similar to what I had long seen and partly forgotten, because remember, she'd seen this all through her life. God has revealed this to her to share in these readings for all of us. Jesus spoke to Eliud also of his journey to the baptism. Remember, he's sowing seeds. That's what he's doing. He had gathered together many people and sent them to the desert near Ophrah, but he said that he would go alone by road past Bethania. So he's sending them ahead to get baptized, because once he's baptized, boom, that ministry, is, I mean, his ministry begins with the wedding at Cana when he does his first miracle, and then he does the proclamation. If you know the rosary, you do from the wedding at Cana, and directly after that first miracle that his mother puts in place, then he goes and does the proclamation of the kingdom. But this is when it is officially started after the baptism. So he's getting everyone ready. And he mentioned also his father, saying he had been in war. This is Eliud. He said that Lazarus and his sisters were rich and they would devote, well, we knew that through other readings, they would devote all they had to the advancement of redemption. Remember, he raises Lazarus to show it's sort of a foreshadowing. Remember, in every story, there's foreshadowing. Lazarus is raised like Jesus will be raised. Go ahead, Jeanette.
I didn't know that that Mary Magdalene was also from the same family. I didn't know that.
She was the adopted. Remember, we've been learning that.
Yeah, but I didn't know it was from Lazarus's.
But right, she had been a rich, and she had that castle, but she was like adopted as a child. Remember, it said that
but I didn't know who it was.
That it
now
was
I
part
remember.
of Lazarus.
Yeah.
Right. And it's just amazing. Remember, there were people died earlier then, and many children were left orphaned, and then other pious people took them in and adopted them. So there will be sometimes a Mary and a Mary in the same family, and it's like, what? That's why they call her Mary of Magdalene, because she has the castle for Magdalene.
Well, Mary, the Virgin Mary's family.
No, Magdalene. I'm talking about Mary.
Yeah,
Magdalene.
but there's also Mary's, like Mary,
Lazarus' sister, and Martha's
daughter.
sister. Oh, and then Mary, Anne's daughter.
Mary,
Virgin Mary had a sister.
There were two Marys there too.
Right. So in any case, we have 5 Marys between Mary of Lazarus' sister. That's a little silent that they talk about here. We have a bunch of Marys here. So just try to keep, the more you learn the stories, the more you'll know which ones they're talking about. Because it can get confusing. In any case, he's explaining here, Lazarus had 3 sisters, Martha, Mary Magdalene, and then the one between them called Mary. This last lived together, secluded, silent. For some reason, Mary is sort of the dumb one, but she becomes the wise. What does Jesus say? He keeps from the wise, he teaches in the parables, but the ones that are poor and are not as smart, he reveals things to. He says that in the gospel. That's basically what they're saying here about the silent Mary, the one considered dumb. And Martha, remember the story. And Jesus says, Martha, Martha, Mary is doing the right thing. She's sitting at my feet in prayer. Because Martha's like, can you tell her to get up and help? She's just sitting there doing nothing, because she's silent, and they treat her disrespectfully. And Jesus says to him, Martha, Martha, which is what he tells us about the poor. Do not discount them. He is telling them in this whole lesson, as you see here, we're going to see in a couple of pages, he's telling them, don't discount the poor and the sick. They need to come to baptism too. He's telling them as he's sowing the seeds. He's saying, and that's basically why they're talking about Mary the younger here. He's putting this in perspective for us. She's looked at as a simpleton, but he's saying, remember, come to me as when we come to Jesus as a child. What does it say? The child will get the kingdom. Remember? That's what the gospel tells us. So the simpletons that everyone disrespects are the ones that are going to have the kingdom, because they understand it is being revealed to them. We are not revealed because we're so brilliant. It is God's grace that gives us this understanding. It's not us. Yes, we're doing spiritual reading. We're putting forth our effort to meet Jesus. But the more we go to do that, the more he reveals to us, not through our intelligence, but through his grace. And the simpletons have the same grace as we do. So don't walk past that homeless person thinking you're so much better, like the Pharisees and the Sadducees. That's what he's saying here. Okay, so let's move on. So the silent Mary, again, that's what he's talking about. Martha's good and pious, and she will with her brother follow me. Mary of the silent, she has possessed a great mind and understanding, but for the good of her soul, they have been withdrawn from her. You see, withdrawn from her. Jesus is coming through. She is not for this world. So be careful when you judge people. My mother was one of those people. My mother was poor. She was, people thought, you know, because my mom had disabilities, but my mother was extremely intelligent. And people used my mother's intelligence. They thought they were manipulating her, but my mother always knew what people were doing. And sometimes her ego kind of got in the way, and she'd be like, yeah, they never give me credit. My mother led a lot of people in her life, but they pretend that it was their idea. But my mother knew this stuff. And this is kind of where I see her as the Mary, because she wasn't on this world. Like, you know, some people are more practical, and like Martha, I'm not real practical, but I was more practical than my mother. Okay. So, but my mother was very wise. That's kind of like what I am seeing. That's how I can understand this, because I've had that with my own mother. But she has never committed sin. My mother was very good lady, I have to say. Certainly not, and I wasn't good like her. If I should speak to her, she would perfectly comprehend the greatest mysteries, because she had spiritual eyes, okay? She would not live much longer. After her death, Lazarus and her sister Martha would follow along and devote all that possessed to the use of the community. Jesus needed the riches of the people around him. He was poor for a reason. He did not want to be laden down by material, but these people like Mary Magdalene and Lazarus, and even the one that gave his tomb to him, that even though he left it, but still he needed these material things just like we do. We don't need to be burdened down by too much stuff, but we need them to survive. And so Jesus needed them, and that was their purpose. And he told Martha, 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 Mary is doing what's right. So he's teaching Martha, even though he needs her riches, he needs her to understand. So it's like, you know, one personality helps each other. Like Jeanette's personality helps me. She's my Mary. You know, that's what I'm saying. So the youngest sister, Mary, strayed from the right path, but she will return and rise to higher sanctity than Martha. My mother, again, She did yoga. She did that, which I think caused a lot. That was her sin. It wasn't, more lust and having sex out of marriage. It was more straying to try to understand the mysteries, which is what people are doing. The New Age people, the people that are doing things, going into portals. What's that thing? The Ouija board. They're trying to get to the other side. They're seeking God, but they're going to the devil to do it. And that is a sin. The Bible tells us astrology.
Remember when Saul did it in the cave, trying to conjure up by this witch? He tried to get, was it Elijah
It's a
that came
sin.
forth? Yeah, and he said, well, why are you calling me? Why are you doing this? You're not supposed to be doing this. You're going to die tomorrow. And that just messed them up. You're not supposed to do this.
Yep. So look, guys, that is basically what those people are doing, which is why we need to evangelize. They're seeking God, and they're going the wrong way, and they don't know because they don't have spiritual eyes. So Mary didn't realize when she was, when she strayed from this path, but she will return and rise to higher sanctity than Martha, because she's that grace is given to her. Remember, the people that sin the most become the ones that God reveals. Like the addict that we look down on and we say, oh, they're choosing this life and blah blah blah. What happens? God redeems them. The lost children, he redeems them. That's what happens here to this Mary. So Eliud spoke of John the Baptist, but he had not yet seen him and was not yet baptized. So that's why Jesus comes to him to tell him. But he's going to go alone, but he's telling everyone, go ahead, get baptized, go ahead, because he's trying to get them ready. So Jesus and Eliud spend the night at the inn, and the following morning they go to Mount Hermon, toward the somewhat dilapidated city of Endor. Apparently Endor is kind of a failing city. So around the inns, and they're all broken walls, and the wagon would pass over them. See, try to image this, as they're going towards, I think they said towards Nazareth in that map we just looked at. So Endor was full of ruins and interspersed with gardens, always around you'll see beautiful pictures of these ruins and then beautiful gardens around them. They always remind me of things like this. And on one side were large, magnificent buildings like palaces. You see that sometimes today, big mansions, and then you'll see dilapidated cities around them. So this was a city of desolation where the war was visible. They get dilapidated because of war. The soldiers would go in and just, take what they wanted to live. And it seemed the inhabitants were a race apart from the Jews. There were no synagogue in Endor. So Jesus went with Eliud to a large square in the side buildings. He couldn't teach in a temple in that city. So what did he do? He went to these buildings that were built around the pond, and the pond was at the center of a green lawn, and the waters and the barks, they're sailing in the pump nearby, and the place bore the appearance of health-giving resort. So many times you'll have these places around these big resort. Funny, who knew there were resorts back then? But there were the baths, and but to us it seems foreign. They're not resort to us today, but back then that was considered a resort. And it's nature. The little water, remember, water is the resort of all of us. It's the healing place we go to. So what do? The secular, they build up spas around water. They don't even know that they're actually seeking the healing water of Christ. You see, when you look at things with spiritual eyes, you'll begin to see those things. So they were occupied by invalids. They're all around because the invalids that are sick want to come to that healing water, and they see the people going to these resorts and they want to get in these baths to get healed. Jesus, accompanied by Eliud, entered one of the buildings because there's no temple in that city. It's dilapidated. It's destroyed by war. So he is hospitably received. Why is that? Because they're poor, and they recognize that. That's why Jesus comes through the poor. Their hearts aren't as hardened like the Pharisees and the Sadducees. which is why Jesus came, to teach us to love our neighbor, to love the poor. His feet are washed. A high seat was erected for him on the lawn, and he taught the people. The women who occupied took the seats in the audience. They were not Orthodox Jews. They were like slaves. He went to the poor because they are just as valuable as all the Jews. I mean, as all the, everyone else, the Gentiles. Jesus is teaching the Gentiles in here. They're oppressed people. They are just as valuable to Jesus's kingdom. In fact, more, because they are revealed things that we aren't. As a nurse, I worked with the Jews on the beach that had that lived lives where they were rich, and their families put them in these rich rehabs. And I would go in those and do my home health. You would go through those, like the way they lived. They weren't nursing homes. They were like assisted living. And as a nurse, would go in them, and they were okay. It was nice. The area, but the people were more hardened. In fact, one of them, their family left to become a nun, because some were interspersed with Gentiles family. And I was doing a dressing every day, and I got to hear about how the family was so angry she became a nun. I said, do you realize how blessed you are? So anyway, we've been on an hour already. Okay. Jeanette sent me a message. Sorry. You could just say it. Anyway, but guys, this is important. We're learning. So here, and so I would go to the poor people. They were more hospitable, loving. That's why Jesus came through the poor. So it's stuff we need to understand. And after a war, their leader, Cicero, they're talking about the local wars and stuff throughout the country were servitude. These were the slaves, but they were needed. There were 400 left. Their forefather had, under David and Solomon, been forced to quarry stones for the building of the temple. That is all they had to serve. That's okay. We are all supposed to be servants. They were long accustomed to this. We're getting there. So this is all just explaining how there was no communication to the Jews. They were allowed to send their children to Jewish schools, but they treated them badly. The poor is always treated badly. Even in our society, we look down on addicts, on mental health, people with mental health issues. But remember, Jesus is still wanting them. So Jesus felt great compassion for them. We are to unite with Christ to feel compassion for them. Jeanette, it's only 7:30. We're fine. He had the sick brought to him. They sat in a kind of bed, at a reclining chair. They had like recliners, not as nice as ours today. And then Jesus instructed them about the Messiah and the baptism. He exhorted them to the latter, means the baptism. He's telling them, go to the baptism. Go, poor people, go. You are welcome. You are wanted. You are to go get your baptism. Remember, we baptize now as children in Catholic because we learned in the Jews through the new covenant, but this is the old covenant they're under. So he's telling them, go to the baptism. Understand your covenants through the story. They are still under the old covenant. So, but we could get baptized as adults. If you weren't baptized as a child and you're coming, if you're a convert, they do it differently. That's okay. You're still baptized. So he sent the parable of the son sent to the father to take possession of the vineyard. Remember, they go and they kill the son in the Bible story. Same thing happens to Jesus. It's a foreshadowing of Jesus. He related to that parable about the vineyard and the son going to take possession. So he related when instructing the poor and neglected heathens. They are still valuable in Jesus's, just like they are for us. The people prepared in the open air because there were no temples. They had no money. He invited the poor and the sick. He even wants the sick because they teach us who are not as sick or as poor to love our neighbor, what we're supposed to do. This action greatly entertained or greatly impressed his entertainers. He and Eliud served them. Here was Jesus, the king, serving them. They didn't know he was the king, but they knew he would, they were like, it made them amazed that he was serving them. They were poor and nobody served them. So this was very touching to them. Imagine Jesus serving you. He serves us every day, guys, every day. That evening, Jesus returned with Eliud to the place outside of Nazareth. So finally, they're down here at Nazareth. If you look here on the map, here they are. They finally are going towards here, where I guess this is somewhere around here. And so the Sycamites, he sees, they had an idol hidden away in a subterranean cavern. And they sprung it up. I guess they had some kind of medieval, like the springs. And here they are idol worshiping. And he's trying to get them away from that. He's trying to say, come to get baptized. Because remember, when we get baptized, we get our gifts. Yes, we get them at confirmation, but we get our gifts at our baptism. It will open their eyes. That's why he wants them baptized, because it will open their eyes from doing this idol at Egypt, this Astarte that he's talking about here. That's what he's explaining to them. On the outlet and stretched arms, the chrysalis, they're looking for God like the New Agers today. It's the same thing. It's a parallel. So tapering at either end, it may have been a foot. So what he's talking about, this idol, and the people worshiped in secret, but Jesus knew that, and he told them, stop doing that. Just like he tells us, stop going to astrologers. I look at astrology for personality, but we are not to look ahead for things. We are not to know these mysteries. They are to be shown to us because we are to love our neighbor and all that. So he's telling them, don't worship these. Stop. Go get baptized. He's leading them. They had been accustomed to sacrifice the deformed children. They had been accustomed to sacrifice and deformed children to the goddess. And he's saying, no, these are valuable people in my kingdom. He wants to teach them compassion. You don't kill and give blood like abortion to the gods. You don't do that. They are valuable. They teach the people. When you have an autistic family member, they teach that family to love. That's what he's telling them here. So this nation has been said defeated in 3 parts. So he's telling them, these scattered slave, greatly oppressed and despised. In the afternoon, Jesus returned to the synagogue and ended in the Sabbath. See, he's teaching them. Okay, then we do this. And we have just a couple more pages here. And he reprimanded them severely for their hard-heartedness toward their abandoned fellow human beings. He's saying, stop doing this to the poor and the disabled. Stop. He's being very severe here. We need to take that for ourselves to understand. Do not look down upon the mentally ill. Do not look down upon the poor. Do not. He's telling them that. He's telling us that. The Jews became favorably inclined to Jesus because they had heard his instructions. Toward evening, he returned to Nazareth with Eliud. So he went through that poor town. He told them all that. And she saw them conversing the whole way, pausing to stand and talk. Eliud was again recalling many incidents of the flight into Egypt, telling Jesus of his childhood, and she saw them again in the vision. And he began asking Jesus whether or not to extend his kingdom over the good people in Egypt who had been impressed by his presence in among his childhood. Because remember what they said, what would Jesus do? All the parents would say, remember that good little boy Jesus? What would Jesus do if you were doing that? Remember, they used him. So Eliud is talking to him about this stuff because he's an old man and he understands. So he saw that journey of Jesus after the rising of Lazarus through the pagan Asia down through Egypt. And it was no dream of mine, for Jesus told Eliud. So she didn't just see this in her vision. He told her this, where the seed had been sown. Again, this is all about sowing the seeds. And he was before his end would reap the harvest. All of these people getting baptized. That's what this is about. Remember, he says to God, you gave me these people. They are mine. They belong to me. And that's what he's saying. That's what he's saying here. So now Eliud didn't know he was God. He's like, okay, I know the sacrifice of the bread and wine. Again, the precursor, remember Melchizedek with the Eucharist. He's saying he knows of that. And he knows that Jesus is related to this Eucharist and like Melchizedek, but he knew not what idea to form of Jesus. He's like, well, are you like a Melchizedek? And Jesus says, no, Melchizedek paved the way. Remember, everything in stories is foreshadowing and like ripples in a pond. He is like Jesus, but he's just paving the way for my sacrifice, meaning for Jesus's sacrifice. He's saying, this is the Eucharist. This is what's going to happen. It's a foreshadowing. But I shall be the sacrifice, like the foreshadowing of Abraham, Isaac, and the son that he goes to sacrifice. He says, do not touch him after he, same thing. Again, precursor. Again, ripples in the pond. Again, foreshadowing. I learned, because that's how humans learn in story. I learned that from the conversation in Noemi, Mary's teacher in the temple was the aunt of Lazarus. So he starts to tell some of these things that we heard. And she belonged to the priestly race of Aaron, although Manna says, so he's telling a little bit of that. And that's the last page. And then he goes on to, they owned the 3 castles in Bithynia, the Herodian, from Gabriel, and Herod also. Remember, Herod had a castle near there. We learned that in the last story, near Magdalene, near Mary Magdalene. Jesus and Eliud spoke of the scandal of Magdalene gave her family, because remember, she slept around. She had a lot of money and she was very decadent and lived the luxurious life. That's where he takes and says, the people who, like Mary, who strayed and were bad and sinned, she did the astrology or whatever, but Mary Magdalene did it through lust. She slept around. She was not a prostitute, guys. Remember, we've been told she's not a prostitute, but she used sex to seduce, and she was seduced, and she liked these men, her slaves and all that. Those were her sins. So that was the scandal. The Magdalene family was a good family. They were a rich, good family with a castle, and she scandalized them. But God took and redeemed her, which was what he does to the poor and the bad people. Us who have sinned, we're all bad people. We're all sinners, just like Mary Magdalene. Her sins are just on display, but we are no better. I'm certainly not. My sins. So Jesus went home with Eliud. Where's home? They're going to Nazareth. They found and assembled 5 disciples, the Essenians. Remember, they're Jews, but they're also the Essenian Jews, and many, which I think are the Ashkenazi, which my daughter is of 50%, and many others who are desirous of going to the baptism. Some publicans also, and had come to Nazareth for the same purpose, and the several bands had already started for the place of baptism. So that's why next reading will be Monday. Jesus in Nazareth, guys. We will be Jesus in Nazareth. Here, they went from up toward here, and they went, or whether they were come from here or not, I don't know, and they went here toward Nazareth. So tomorrow, not tomorrow, but Monday, we'll be reading about Jesus in Nazareth. We are getting so close, guys. So please come to the next reading, because let me see, how long is the next reading? It is... Oh, next reading, Jesus in Nazareth, only 4 pages. So it'll be a quick one. But guys, I hope you got a lot out today. Yes, we went a little over an hour. That's okay. You can do it fast. You go to the YouTube, on my YouTube, and you can watch. Actually, I think you can even do it on Facebook. But in any case, you can watch in fast speed. I got to teach Jeanette these things for her, but she doesn't like things in fast speed though. But anyway, guys,
no, I'm very slow.
But that's how Mary is. She ponders and slow and like the child. And so look, that's okay, because we're but for people that are just listening, they can use your pondering. I use your pondering, Jeanette. I use it. You go slow and I'm like, I have to listen fast, but at least I get you pondering it. No, but that's important. We all have our place. So guys, please join us. Jeanette, do you have any last things?
No.
Look at Jeanette's little, show us your gray. Oh. She put a little stripe
guys,
show it.
My husband doesn't like me to cut my hair, and I've been wanting to cut my hair for a while. I get so bored with my hair, and I don't want to color it anymore. Yeah. So I got these strands different. I got these different colored strands.
I love it.
To match your clothes.
She's
And then you just-
Hispanic. They're fancy.
Yeah, you just clip them in your hair. And since I got my
I think it's
funky
cute.
shirt on, I said, I'll match my
Which
shirt.
shirt? Let me see your shirt. What
It's
shirt?
just a love. It's just love. Love.
Oh, she's our little hippie. I was a hippie too.
Yeah,
I
I'm a
was a
hippie.
hippie too. I was into the rock and roll and stuff. I can't take loud music anymore.
I'm a
But-
Jesus freak hippie. Yep.
Yes, yes, she was.
Lily.
What'd you say?
Lily.
Lily. He's calling me Lily from the Monsters. 'Cause I'm like,
Ah, and also her husband used to drive a motorcycle, if you don't know. That's how she met him. She met him on a motorcycle. I love your love story. If you haven't listened to Jeanette's love story, you have to listen to the Joseph consecration that we did. It's below in a
Oh.
link, and you'll hear
oh,
Jeanette.
I gotta show you something real quick before you go.
What?
I gotta show you something. Look, I put Bina's well Greg did. Greg cut a piece of wood for me and he put a little thing to hang it.
Oh my God. Oh my gosh, I just bought that for my daughter and put it in a frame. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. What bring it close. Bring it close. What does it say?
We actually decoupaged it on a piece of wood.
You got it in poster. Oh, I love it. Let me see the
Yeah,
front.
it's a big poster.
What is it? What does it say? What psalm? Because I got it for my daughter. I gave it to her.
Yeah, you see
She's a nurse.
Jesus holding a stethoscope. Is that how you say stethoscope?
Yeah.
And then it
Stethoscope.
says, here I am, Lord, send me. Isaiah 6:8.
That's
Here
for
I
nurses.
am, Lord, send
That's
me.
for nurses. Yes.
Yes.
And I sent that to Jeanette from Timo.
Or doctors.
For doctors and nurses. And Jeanette ordered the poster. I ordered the little one because my daughter.
For my
doesn't like
daughter,
big
because
ones.
my daughter works in
Our daughter's a nurse.
yeah, she works in the critical department of the ICU of infants. So she's so stressed out all the time, but she loves her job so much. She loves
she
it.
is God's instrument, as people are for healing, and God used them, and that's why she prays before she goes to her.
Yes, and she prays with them there and everything. She's
It's Advent. Advent's very. So Jeanette's husband put that on there. Guys, you can order them on Temu for like a couple dollars. I ordered for my daughter, and then you can get I ordered again on Temu, a matted thing, and then I have for my daughter. She doesn't like big.
And it's beautiful because it's like a vinyl, so you don't even need, it's like a canvas vinyl thing, shiny, so you don't even need, you just need something hard to glue it on, and that's it.
And you could decoupage, but you can also make it look like a painting, Jeanette.
Yeah,
by
you can
using
make it
using that clear not gesso. What's that clear stuff you put on top of a painting?
Yeah, it's a decoupage. It's what I used for the back of this.
No, there's another one that artists.
Yeah, you put it on top of it.
Right, but you
too.
can make it look like there's brush strokes in it. It's a certain kind of
Oh, I
thing that
don't know
artists use. I'll find it and I'll put it. I'll ask
Yeah.
him, our artist, who's going to teach us an icon class.
Yeah.
Anyway, guys, that was beautiful.
Okay.
Jeanette. Thank you for sharing that with us. Bye.
Love you guys. Bye.